The massive transport ship Harmony's Edge drifted through the void between star systems when Captain Sarah Chen received the distress signal. It came through on an ancient frequency, one that hadn't been used by any known species in over 2 centuries. The bridge crew exchanged worried glances as the translation matrix struggled to decode the message. "Captain, we're getting something," Communications Officer Martinez called out, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "It's strange. The language patterns don't match anything in our databases." Sarah stood from her command chair, her weathered face showing the concern she felt. The Harmony's Edge was a civilian vessel, carrying families and scientists to the new colony world of Haven's Rest. They weren't equipped for military encounters, but her crew had served together for years. They knew their ship and each other. "Put it through the speakers," she ordered. A voice filled the bridge, deep and resonant, speaking words that seemed to carry centuries of pain. The translation came moments later, filtered through the ship's advanced linguistics program. "To any who hear this message, my name is Zephyrian of the Golden Peaks. I am of the ancient draconic peoples. My crime was simple. I allowed my mate to bear daughters. For this, the High Council has sentenced me to exile among the void. My family, they will suffer for my defiance." The message continued, explaining how the draconic civilization had developed rigid laws about reproduction. Only male offspring were considered valuable, as they could grow large enough to serve in their military forces. Females were seen as weak, unable to reach the massive sizes that made dragons feared across the galaxy. Any dragon who produced female offspring was considered genetically inferior and faced severe punishment. "The Council has taken my daughters," the voice continued, heavy with grief. "They will be disposed of, unless I submit to permanent exile. But I cannot abandon them. I drift here between worlds, unable to return but unwilling to flee. If anyone receives this message, if there are still those who believe in justice." The transmission cut off abruptly. Sarah looked around her bridge crew. These weren't soldiers or diplomats. They were ordinary humans, engineers, scientists, teachers, and their families. But something in that dragon's voice had touched them all. "Ma'am," Martinez spoke up quietly, "I'm detecting a heat signature about 3 million kilometers off our starboard bow. It's big." "How big?" Sarah asked. "Roughly the size of a small moon." The main viewer shifted to show a shape drifting in space. It was indeed massive, easily dwarfing their transport ship. The creature was beautiful in a terrifying way. Scales that gleamed like molten gold, wings that could have wrapped around their entire vessel, and eyes that burned with an inner fire even across the vast distance. "He's alive," whispered Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist. "In hard vacuum. How is that possible?" Sarah had heard stories of the ancient dragons, though most humans believed them to be myths. Supposedly, they were among the oldest spacefaring species capable of surviving in the vacuum of space for extended periods. Their scales could seal against the void, and their internal biology could slow to almost nothing while still maintaining consciousness. "Captain," came a new voice from the communications array. This time it was speaking directly to them, the translation more refined as their computer learned the language patterns. "I detect your vessel. I mean no harm to your kind. I know not what species you are, but I sense kindness in your hesitation to flee." Sarah made a decision that would change everything. "Open a channel." The bridge fell silent as she stepped forward. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Harmony's Edge. We received your distress call. What's your situation?" A pause, then. "Humans. I have heard tales of your species, though we have never met. You are the ones who stood against the hegemony at the Battle of 7 Stars, yes? Who fought for smaller species when they could not fight for themselves? That was before my time, but yes, that's part of who we are. Then perhaps there is hope. Captain Chen, my name is Zephyrian. I am sentenced to exile for the crime of loving my daughters. The High Council of my people believes that female dragons are worthless, weak things that should not be allowed to live. They have taken my 3 daughters and will execute them unless I submit to banishment and never return to our worlds." Sarah felt her jaw clench. The idea of killing children for being the wrong gender was abhorrent to her human sensibilities. "How old are your daughters?" "In your years?" "Perhaps equivalent to human children of 8, 10, and 12. They are young, barely able to fly. They have done nothing wrong except exist." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. "Captain, if I may? Zephyrian, can you tell us more about dragon biology? Why does your council consider females inferior?" The great dragon's voice carried a bitter laugh. "Because they do not grow as large as males. An adult male dragon can reach lengths of several hundred meters with wingspan to match. Females typically reach only half that size at maturity. The council sees this as weakness, unsuitability for war. They cannot see that my mate is faster, more agile, more intelligent than most males. They cannot see that our daughters show promise beyond anything I have ever witnessed." "What kind of promise?" Sarah asked. "My eldest daughter, Stellaris, can manipulate electromagnetic fields with her breath, not just fire, but precise electrical control. My middle daughter, Nebula, has already shown the ability to navigate hyperspace without instruments, an ability that takes most dragons centuries to develop. And my youngest, Luna, can communicate telepathically with other species, something no dragon has ever been able to do." The bridge crew exchanged amazed looks. These weren't weaknesses. They were incredible abilities that could revolutionize space travel and communication. Sarah made another decision. "Zephyrian, we can't just leave you here, and we can't let your daughters be executed for being extraordinary. Tell us about your people's military capabilities." "You would help, even though my people have never aided yours? Even though this could bring the wrath of the Draconic Empire upon you?" "That's exactly why we'll help," Sarah said firmly. "Because it's the right thing to do." Over the next few hours, Zephyrian explained the structure of his civilization. The Draconic Empire controlled 17 star systems, with military outposts scattered throughout. Their technology was ancient but powerful, relying on bioengineered modifications to their natural abilities rather than external devices. Most concerning was the High Council itself. 9 of the largest, oldest male dragons, each capable of reducing entire planets to molten slag. But Zephyrian also revealed something crucial. The Empire was not as unified as it appeared. Many dragons disagreed with the gender laws but were too afraid to speak out. There were resistance cells, hidden networks of dragons who helped females escape or who protested the treatment of their daughters. "If someone could unite them," Zephyrian said thoughtfully, "if someone could show that there was hope of changing things." Sarah looked at her crew, 847 human colonists, including families with children, scientists, engineers, teachers. They weren't warriors, but they were humans, and humans had a long history of standing up to bullies. "Then I guess we're going to war," she said quietly. The Harmony's Edge approached the outer rim of the Draconic Empire 3 days later. Zephyrian traveled alongside them, his massive form dwarfing their ship as he guided them through the hidden routes known only to exiles and rebels. Sarah had spent those 3 days learning everything she could about dragon society, and what she discovered both amazed and horrified her. The Draconic Empire had once been a peaceful civilization of explorers and scholars. Dragons lived for millennia, accumulating vast knowledge and wisdom. But over the centuries, as they encountered hostile species and fought numerous wars, their culture had shifted toward militarism. Size became synonymous with strength, and strength became the only valued trait. "My great-grandmother told stories of the old ways," Zephyrian explained as they passed through an asteroid field. "Before the gender laws, female dragons were revered as the keepers of wisdom and memory. They were our historians, our diplomats, our navigators. But when the Void Wars began 8 centuries ago, the High Council decided that only warriors mattered." Dr. Vasquez had been studying the biological data Zephyrian provided. "From what I can see, female dragons aren't actually smaller due to any inherent weakness. They're smaller because they allocate their biological resources differently. Males pour everything into physical size and brute force. Females develop more complex neural structures, enhanced sensory organs, and specialized abilities. Exactly, Zephyrian confirmed. But try explaining evolutionary optimization to dragons who believe bigger is always better. Their first destination was Refuge Station, a hidden asteroid base where dragon exiles gathered. As they approached, Sarah was stunned to see how many dragons were there, dozens of massive forms moving through space around the hollowed-out asteroid. Most were females with their children, but she also spotted several males. The station commander was a female, dragon named Paraxis, whose scales were deep blue-black like the void itself. She was smaller than Zephyrian, but radiated an intelligence and authority that made Sarah immediately respect her. So, Paraxis said after the introductions were complete, her mental voice somehow reaching Sarah's mind directly. Humans have decided to involve themselves in our civil war. Why? Sarah had prepared for this question. Because we've been where you are. Humans spent thousands of years believing that half our population was inferior based on gender. We fought wars, oppressed entire groups, and threw away the talents of billions of people. It nearly destroyed us. We learned that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. And you think you can teach ancient dragons this lesson? I think dragons, who are already living this truth, can teach the rest. We're just here to help level the playing field. Pyraxis studied the human captain for a long moment. Then, to Sarah's surprise, she laughed, a sound like distant thunder. You humans are either very brave or very foolish, perhaps both. Come, let me show you what you're truly up against. The asteroid station was more sophisticated than it appeared from outside. Tunnels carved through the rock connected vast chambers where dragons could rest, along with smaller spaces designed for other species who had joined the rebellion. Sarah met refugees from a dozen different worlds, species who had been enslaved or displaced by the Draconic Empire's aggressive expansion. This is what the High Council doesn't understand, Paraxis explained as they walked through a chamber where young dragons played together regardless of gender. Their obsession with male supremacy has made enemies of half the galaxy. Species that might have been allies are now convinced that all dragons are tyrants. In the station's command center, Sarah saw the true scope of the challenge ahead. Holographic displays showed the 17 draconic worlds, each heavily defended. The High Council's personal fleet consisted of massive bioships grown from dragon genetic material, living vessels that could self-repair and adapt mid-battle. The executions are scheduled to take place on Draconis Prime in 4 days, Paraxis said grimly, during the Festival of Strength when the entire Empire will be watching. Zephyrian's daughters will be brought before the High Council and incinerated publicly, as an example to any other dragons who might consider defying the gender laws. Sarah studied the tactical display. Draconis Prime was the Empire's capital, world, surrounded by defensive stations and patrolled by hundreds of dragon warriors. A direct assault would be suicide, even with the Harmony's Edge's advanced human technology. What about the resistance cells you mentioned? She asked. Zephyrian brightened. Yes, there are dragons on every world who secretly oppose the Council, but they need a signal, something to show them that rebellion is possible. What kind of signal? If my daughters could be rescued publicly, if the galaxy could see that the mighty High Council could be defied. Paraxis trailed off, then looked at Sarah with new interest. You're not thinking of a rescue mission. You're thinking of a rescue broadcast. Sarah nodded. If we could not only save the girls but do it in a way that every dragon in the Empire could witness, it would prove that the Council isn't invincible. It might inspire others to stand up. It would also put enormous targets on all our heads, Dr. Vasquez pointed out. We already have those, Sarah replied. The moment we decided to help Zephyrian, we became enemies of the Draconic Empire. At least this way, we might accomplish something meaningful. Over the next day, they developed a plan that was equal parts brilliant and insane. The Festival of Strength was broadcast throughout the Empire using an ancient network of communication, satellites. If they could hack into that network, they could ensure that every dragon in the 17 systems would witness the rescue. The technical challenges were enormous. Human computer systems were incompatible with dragon biotechnology. But they had advantages the Council couldn't anticipate. The Harmony's Edge carried the most advanced human stealth technology, designed to hide from electronic sensors. Dragons, despite their advanced biological abilities, still relied on conventional detection methods. More importantly, they had allies the Council didn't know about. Paraxis revealed that nearly a third of the dragons on Draconis Prime secretly supported changing the gender laws. They had been waiting for leadership for someone to make the first move. "There's something else," Zephyrian said during their final planning session. "My mate, Aurelin, is still free. She's been hiding in the crystal caves beneath Draconis Prime, trying to find a way to rescue our daughters herself. If we could coordinate with her." Sarah felt a smile spreading across her face. "Tell me about these crystal caves." "They're natural formations that run beneath the capital city. The crystals interfere with most forms of detection, and there are hundreds of tunnels. Aurelin knows them better than anyone. She's a geologist by training." The plan began to take shape. While the High Council and their guards focused on the grand ceremony above ground, a small human strike team would infiltrate through the crystal caves. Meanwhile, the Harmony's Edge would position itself to hack the communication network and broadcast the rescue to the entire Empire. But they needed more than just a rescue. They needed to send a message that would resonate across the galaxy. "What if," Dr. Vasquez suggested, "we could demonstrate the abilities of female dragons during the rescue? Show the entire Empire what they're really throwing away?" Pyraxis nodded, enthusiastically. Stellaris's electromagnetic manipulation, Nebula's hyperspace navigation, Luna's telepathic communication. If the Empire could see these gifts in action, then they'd realize they've been executing their most valuable citizens, Sarah finished. As they made final preparations, Sarah couldn't help but think about the magnitude of what they were attempting. They were about to declare war on one of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations. The smart thing would be to continue to Haven's Rest, deliver their colonists safely, and pretend they had never met Zephyrian. But that wasn't the human way. Throughout their species' history, humans had repeatedly chosen to stand up for others, even when it meant facing impossible odds. It was what had earned them respect among the galactic community, their stubborn refusal to abandon those in need. "Lieutenant," Commander Rodriguez, her second-in-command, joined her as she stared out at the stars surrounding Refuge Station. "Second thoughts, Captain?" he asked. "Many," she admitted. "But not about whether we should do this, just about whether we can pull it off. We've got good people, Captain, and we've got something the Council doesn't." "What's that?" "We've got nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Plus," he grinned, "we're humans. We specialize in impossible." As if summoned by their conversation, Zephyrian appeared outside the station's viewport, his golden scales catching the light of the distant star. "Captain Chen," his voice resonated in their minds, "I want you to know that whatever happens, you have already given me something I thought I had lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope." The crystal caves beneath Draconis Prime were more beautiful and treacherous than Sarah had imagined. Massive formations of living crystal grew from floor to ceiling, pulsing with bioluminescent energy that provided the only light in the deep tunnels. The crystals were alive in a way that human science struggled to understand. They absorbed and redirected various forms of energy, creating a natural stealth field that made electronic detection impossible. Sarah led a team of 12 humans through the winding passages guided by signals from Aurelin, Zephyrian's mate. The female dragon had been hiding in these caves for weeks, slowly mapping routes to the surface and gathering intelligence on the execution ceremony. When they finally met her in a vast underground chamber, Sarah was struck by how different she appeared from the male dragons they had encountered. Aurelin was smaller than Zephyrian, but her scales were more complex, shifting colors that seemed to reflect the crystal formations around them. Her eyes held an ancient wisdom that spoke of centuries of accumulated knowledge, and when she looked at the humans, Sarah felt as though she was being evaluated by someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall. "So you are the humans who would challenge the High Council," Aurelin said, her mental voice carrying both gratitude and concern. Zephyrian has told me of your offer, but I must ask, do you truly understand what you face? The council members are not merely large dragons. They are living weapons, each capable of devastating entire fleets. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific mind focused on practical questions. Can you tell us about their abilities? We need to understand what we're up against. Counselor, Malachar breathes plasma hot enough to melt starship hulls. Counselor Vorthak can generate electromagnetic pulses that disable electronics across entire star systems. Counselor Grimjaw. Orlin paused, her mental voice growing heavy with old fear. Grimjaw can manipulate gravity itself. He once collapsed a rebel space station simply by thinking about it. Sarah felt her team's confidence waver, but she pressed on. What about their weaknesses? Everyone has them. Their arrogance, Orlin replied immediately. They have ruled for so long, faced so few real challenges, that they no longer expect serious opposition. They will assume that any rescue attempt will be crude and direct. They will not expect subtlety or coordination. Over the next few hours, Orlin guided them through the tunnel system, explaining how the crystal caves connected to ancient maintenance shafts that ran beneath the capital city. The execution platform was built above the Grand Amphitheater, a massive structure that could hold millions of spectators. But beneath it lay forgotten passages from the city's early construction. The platform itself is heavily guarded, Orlin explained as they studied holographic maps projected by her natural abilities. But the holding cells where they keep my daughters are in the lower levels connected to these tunnels, if we can reach them during the ceremony when most guards are focused on crowd control. What about extraction? Asked Rodriguez. Even if we free them, how do we get out with 3 young dragons? Orlin's mental voice carried a note of pride. My daughters are special, even by the standards of female dragons. Stellaris can manipulate electromagnetic fields with unprecedented precision. Nebula can open hyperspace rifts without external technology. And Luna. She paused, radiating maternal love. Luna can coordinate minds across vast distances. If we can free them, they can help with their own rescue. Sarah felt pieces of the plan clicking into place. What if we don't try to extract them immediately? What if we free them during the ceremony and let them demonstrate their abilities live in front of the entire Empire? The idea was audacious beyond measure. Instead of a quiet rescue, they would turn the execution ceremony into a demonstration of everything the High Council was trying to destroy. But the risks were enormous. If anything went wrong, they would all be captured or killed in front of billions of witnesses. The broadcast network, Martinez noted. We'd need to maintain the signal boost from the Harmony's edge throughout the entire operation. Any interference and we lose our chance to reach the resistance cells. I can help with that, Orlin said. Female dragons have natural abilities to manipulate energy fields. If I can reach the primary broadcast crystal, I can ensure the signal reaches every world in the Empire. As they made final preparations, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. The plan was solid, but it relied too heavily on everything going perfectly. In her experience, military operations never went according to plan. Her concerns proved prophetic when they reached the lower levels beneath the amphitheater. The holding cells weren't just guarded. They were suspended in an energy field that would instantly alert the Council to any intrusion attempt. This wasn't in the intelligence reports, whispered Sergeant Kim, their demolitions expert. Orlin studied the energy field with growing alarm. This is new. They must have suspected I was still in the area. The field is generated by Council. Member Vorthak himself. His electromagnetic abilities maintain the barrier. Sarah's mind raced through alternatives. They couldn't disable the field without alerting Vorthak, and they couldn't reach the daughters without passing through it. Unless. What if we don't disable it? What if we use it? Dr. Vasquez caught on immediately. If Stellaris can manipulate electromagnetic fields, she might be able to turn the barrier itself into a weapon. But first we need to communicate with her, Rodriguez pointed out. Luna, Orlin said with sudden excitement. My youngest daughter can establish telepathic contact across any distance. If we can get close enough for her to sense our presence, They repositioned themselves directly beneath the holding cells, Sarah's heart pounding as they crept through maintenance tunnels that hadn't been used in centuries. Above them, they could hear the rumbling of massive crowds gathering for the Festival of Strength. The ceremony would begin in less than an hour. Aurelin pressed her consciousness upward, searching for her daughter's minds. Long moments passed before her mental voice carried relief and joy. "I found them. Luna has established contact. The girls are frightened but unharmed. They're being held in separate cells to prevent them from coordinating their abilities." "Can Luna relay messages between all of you?" Sarah asked. "Yes. She's creating a mental network. We can all communicate now." Suddenly, Sarah could hear new voices in her mind. Young, scared, but incredibly brave. The dragon daughters had been facing execution with remarkable courage, sustained only by hope that their parents might somehow save them. "Mama," came the youngest voice. "Luna, are the humans really here to help us?" "Yes, little star. They're going to help us show the Empire what we can really do." Through Luna's telepathic network, they quickly coordinated a new plan. Instead of trying to break the girls out before the ceremony, they would wait until the perfect moment when the entire Empire was watching, when the High Council was focused on their grand display of power. Stellaris would use her electromagnetic abilities to overload the containment field and convert it into a signal amplifier for Luna's telepathic abilities. Nebula would open hyperspace rifts to confuse and disorient the guards, and Luna would broadcast their message of defiance directly into the minds of every dragon in the Empire. "There's something else." Stellaris's young voice reached them, carrying unexpected steel. "I've been studying the energy patterns in this prison. The whole structure is connected to the broadcast network. If I overload it at just the right moment." "What happens?" Sarah asked. "The feedback surge will travel through every communication crystal in the Empire. Every dragon will not only hear our message, they'll feel it, experience it directly. They'll know exactly what the Council is trying to destroy." The plan was insane, dangerous, and completely impossible by any reasonable standard. It was also exactly the kind of desperate gamble that had made humans legendary throughout the galaxy. "Captain," Rodriguez said quietly, "the ceremony is beginning. We need to move to our positions." Sarah checked her equipment one final time. The human strike team would remain in the tunnels, ready to provide cover and extraction if needed. But the real battle would be fought by 3 young dragons who had never been allowed to discover their true potential. Above them, the Festival of Strength began with fanfare that shook the crystal formations around them. Through Luna's telepathic link, they could experience what the dragons were seeing. Millions of spectators, the massive forms of the High Council members, and the ceremonial platform where 3 small dragons were being brought for execution. "They're so young," Dr. Vasquez whispered, seeing the girls through their mother's eyes. "They're also the most powerful dragons born in centuries," Aurelin replied with fierce pride. "The Council fears them because they represent everything the old ways could have become. Today the galaxy will see why." The battle that erupted in the Grand Amphitheater was unlike anything in the recorded history of the Draconic Empire. For the first time in 8 centuries, dragons fought dragons not over territory or resources, but over the fundamental question of what their species could become. Councillor Grimjaw's roar shook the crystalline structures of the capital city as he launched himself at Zephyrian. The 2 massive males collided in mid-air above the execution platform, their impact sending shockwaves through the amphitheater. But this was not the one-sided fight the Council had expected. Through Luna's telepathic network, dragons throughout, the Empire could feel everything, every blow, every surge of emotion, every moment of the historic confrontation. More importantly, they could sense the support flowing towards Zephyrian from thousands of dragons who had finally found the courage to reveal their true feelings. "Citizens of the Empire," Zephyrian called out as he grappled with Grimjaw, his voice somehow reaching every connected mind. "For 800 years we have thrown away half our potential. We have murdered our daughters, exiled our brightest minds, and called it strength. No more." Sarah and her team had reached the detention level, but the battle above made their original rescue plan impossible. The entire structure was shaking as council members and rebel dragons clashed throughout the amphitheater. Worse, Loyalist forces were converging on their position. "Captain," Martinez called over the chaos, "we've got company. Dragon guards moving fast through the tunnels." "How many?" "Too many. We need an alternative exit." That was when Orlin made a decision that terrified and amazed Sarah in equal measure. The female dragon began to grow, her body expanding until she filled the entire tunnel system around them. Sarah had never seen a dragon transform like this. Orlin was making herself larger, burning through centuries of stored energy to match the size of the approaching guards. "Get to my daughters," she told the humans, her mental voice strained with effort. "I'll hold them here." "You'll burn yourself out," Dr. Vasquez protested. "Dragons aren't meant to grow that fast. Female dragons aren't supposed to be able to grow this large at all," Orlin replied grimly. "But my daughters just proved that supposed to doesn't mean much anymore." The tunnel system became a battleground as Orlin held off wave after wave of Council loyalists. Her smaller size had always meant greater agility and precision, but now she had matched their mass while retaining her advantages. The guards had never faced a female dragon who could fight them on equal terms. Meanwhile, Sarah's team reached the detention cells where the 3 young dragons were being held. The energy barriers were fluctuating wildly due to Stellaris' electromagnetic interference, but they were still active. "Stellaris," Sarah called through Luna's mental link, "can you disable these barriers?" "I'm trying, but Counselor Vorthak is fighting me for control. He's older and more experienced." "Then don't fight him directly," Dr. Vasquez suggested. "You've been thinking like he does, trying to overpower the system. What if you worked with it instead?" Through the mental link, Sarah could feel Stellaris' moment of understanding. Instead of trying to destroy the energy barriers, the young dragon began to reshape them, turning the prison cells into amplification chambers for her sister's abilities. Nebula's hyperspace manipulation expanded exponentially, allowing her to open rifts large enough for dragons to travel through. Luna's telepathic range increased to cover not just the 17 worlds of the Empire, but neighboring systems where other species lived. "I can feel them," Luna whispered in amazement. "Humans, Altarians, crystalline entities, all the species Papa told us about, they're listening to us, and they were." Sarah realized that Luna's enhanced telepathic broadcast was reaching far beyond the Draconic Empire, carrying the story of the rebellion to dozens of galactic civilizations. Species that had feared or fought the dragons for centuries were witnessing a transformation that could change everything. Above them, the battle between Zephyrian and Grimjaw had become a symbol for the entire conflict. The Supreme Counselor was larger and more experienced, but Zephyrian fought with the desperate strength of a parent protecting his children. More importantly, he wasn't fighting alone. Female dragons throughout the amphitheater were using their abilities to support him. Some manipulated gravity to interfere with Grimjaw's attacks. Others used electromagnetic pulses to disrupt the Council's coordination. A few opened hyperspace rifts to redirect the Supreme Counselor's breath weapons back at him. "This is what you never understood," Zephyrian panted as he dodged another massive claw swipe. "You thought strength meant fighting alone, but true strength comes from fighting together." Counselor Vorthak tried to rally the other council members. "Destroy the broadcast crystals. Cut the telepathic link. If we can stop the transmission, he..." never finished the sentence. Paraxis, the resistance leader from Refuge Station, emerged from a hyperspace rift directly behind him. She had grown to nearly his size, her blue-black scales crackling with energy she had stored for decades. "Too late," she said simply, before her breath weapon enveloped the council member in plasma hot enough to melt battleship armor. The death of Vorthak sent shockwaves through both sides of the conflict. For the first time in the Empire's history, a council member had been killed by a female dragon. The symbol of their supposed weakness had proven false in the most dramatic way possible. But the remaining council members weren't finished. Counselor Malachar began to glow with internal heat, preparing to unleash a breath weapon that would incinerate everything within kilometers of the amphitheater. "He's going to destroy the entire city rather than admit defeat," Orlin warned, from her position in the tunnels. That was when the 3 young dragons made their most crucial decision. Despite being separated by energy barriers and facing execution, They reached out through Luna's telepathic network and touched the minds of every dragon in the amphitheater. "We forgive you," came Stellaris's voice, clear and strong despite her youth. "We understand your fear," added Nebula, her wisdom beyond her years. "But we won't let fear destroy our people," Luna concluded. Together they did something that would reshape dragon civilization forever. They opened their minds completely, sharing not just their thoughts and emotions, but their very essence with every dragon in the Empire. In that moment, millions of dragons experienced what it truly meant to be female in their society. The constant fear, the suppressed abilities, the love for children they weren't allowed to raise. But they also experienced the hope, the dreams, the incredible potential that had been wasted for 8 centuries. They felt the joy of discovery, the satisfaction of cooperation, the strength that came from diversity rather than uniformity. Counselor Malakar's preparation for his devastating attack faltered as the wave of emotion and understanding washed over him. For the first time in centuries, he remembered what it felt like to doubt, to question, to wonder if there might be a better way. He began, his voice uncertain for the first time in living memory. "You can choose differently," Zephyrian said gently, recognizing the crack in the Council's unity. "It's not too late to choose a better future for our people." Around the amphitheater, the fighting was slowing as dragons on both sides experienced the telepathic revelation. Some of the Council loyalists were laying down their weapons, their certainty shattered by the direct experience of their victims' perspectives. But Counselor Grimjaw refused to yield. "No!" he roared, his massive form radiating fury. "I will not see our empire weakened by sentiment. I will not watch our species become soft." He launched himself not at Zephyrian, but directly at the detention cells where the 3 young dragons were held. If he could eliminate them, he could end the telepathic broadcast and restore the old order. Sarah raised her weapon, knowing it would be useless against something the size of a battleship. But she had to try. She never got the chance to fire. The Harmony's Edge materialized above the amphitheater, its human crew having used dragon hyperspace technology to achieve impossible precision. The ship's weapons, designed for defensive purposes, fired not at Grimjaw but at the detention facility itself. The energy barriers collapsed, freeing the 3 young dragons just as the Supreme Counselor reached them. But instead of fleeing, they stood their ground. "We're not afraid of you anymore," Stellaris said, her young voice carrying absolute conviction. And then they showed the Empire exactly what 3 young female dragons could do when they worked together without fear or restraint. What happened next would be remembered as the moment the old draconic empire truly died and something new was born. The 3 young dragons, no longer constrained by energy barriers or fear, combined their abilities in ways that defied every law of dragon physiology the High Council thought they understood. Stellaris reached out with her electromagnetic powers and grasped the fundamental forces that held Counselor Grimjaw's massive form together. She didn't try to harm him. Instead, she began to restructure his neural pathways, forcing him to experience every memory of every female dragon he had condemned to death. Nebula opened dozens of tiny hyperspace rifts around the Supreme Counselor, not to transport him anywhere, but to create a temporal distortion field that slowed his movements to a crawl while accelerating the consciousness transfer her sister was performing. And Luna, youngest of the 3, projected their combined experience into the mind of every sentient being within 100 light-years. Dragons, humans, aliens, all witnessed the supreme moment when absolute power was confronted by absolute truth. Grimjaw's roar of fury became a wail of anguish as 8 centuries of suppressed memories flooded through his consciousness. He experienced the terror of mothers watching their daughters taken away. He felt the desperation of fathers forced to choose between exile and compliance. He lived through the deaths of countless brilliant female dragons whose only crime had been existing. "Stop," he whispered, his massive form trembling. "Please, stop." But the 3 young dragons didn't stop. They continued their mental assault, forcing him to confront not just the pain he had caused but the incredible potential he had destroyed. Through Luna's telepathic projection, the entire galaxy watched as the Supreme Counselor of the Draconic Empire broke down completely. Sarah watched from the ruins of the detention facility, amazed by what these children were accomplishing. They weren't just defeating their enemy, they were transforming him, forcing him to become the person he could have been if the gender laws had never existed. "This is what true strength looks like," Dr. Vasquez whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Not domination, but understanding. Not conquest, but conversion." The other council members tried to rally, but the damage was done. The telepathic broadcast had reached every corner of the Empire, and dragons everywhere were experiencing the same revelation that had broken Grimjaw. On 17 worlds, the gender laws were being openly defied as dragons chose conscience over compliance. Zephyrian landed beside his daughters, his golden scales dim with exhaustion, but his eyes blazing with pride. "You did it," he said simply. "You've changed everything." "We all did it," Stellaris corrected, gesturing toward the humans, toward Pyraxis and the other rebels, toward the thousands of dragons who had found the courage to stand up. "That's what you taught us, Papa. Real strength comes from working together." Orlin emerged from the tunnel system, her expanded form slowly returning to normal size as she burned through the last of her stored energy. The effort had cost her centuries of accumulated power, but her smile showed she considered it well spent. "The resistance cells are reporting in from all 17 worlds," she announced. "The gender laws are being repealed by planetary governments, faster than the loyalist forces can respond. It's over." But Sarah knew it wasn't really over. It was just beginning. The fall of the old empire would create massive upheaval throughout this region of the galaxy. There would be civil wars, refugee crises, economic collapse, and countless other challenges. "What happens now?" she asked Zephyrian. The great dragon considered her question carefully. "Now we learn to be the civilization we should have been, all along. We'll need help. Guidance from species who have already walked the path from oppression to equality. Species like humanity. You want us to stay? I want us to join the greater galactic community as partners rather than conquerors. My daughters have shown us abilities we never imagined possible. Imagine what we could accomplish if we worked with other species instead of dominating them." Luna, still maintaining her telepathic network, brought news from across the Empire. "The Altarians are offering humanitarian aid. The crystalline entities want to establish diplomatic relations. Even the void-touched are sending messages of congratulations." "And the humans?" Nebula asked, looking directly at Sarah. Sarah felt the weight of history on her shoulders. Humanity had just helped trigger the transformation of one of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations. The repercussions would echo for millennia. "Humans will do what we always do," she said finally. "We'll help where we can, learn from our mistakes, and try to leave the galaxy a little better than we found it." The Harmony's Edge landed in the amphitheater, its crew working alongside Dragon engineers to establish communication with the refugee stations and resistance cells. Throughout the Empire, Captain Chen's decision to answer a distress call had led to the most significant political upheaval in galactic history. But perhaps the most important changes were happening on a smaller scale. Throughout the Empire, dragon families were reuniting. Daughters who had been hidden or exiled were returning home. Mothers who had been forced to abandon their children were embracing them for the first time in decades. Counselor Grimjaw, his massive form still trembling from the telepathic revelation, approached the group slowly. His ancient eyes, which had radiated cruel authority for centuries, now showed something Sarah had never expected to see: genuine remorse. "I remember her name," he said quietly. "The first female I condemned to death. Seraphina of the Morning Stars. She was barely older than your daughters, and she could sing hyperspace itself into new configurations. I called her weak because she preferred creation to destruction." Zephyrian studied his former enemy carefully. "Do you truly understand what you've done? What we've all lost?" "I understand that I spent 8 centuries believing that might made right. That size determined worth, that fear was the same as strength. I understand that I was wrong about everything that mattered." Grimjaw's voice carried the weight of genuine regret. "I cannot undo the deaths, cannot restore the lives I destroyed. But perhaps I can spend whatever time remains to me trying to build something better. It was Luna who answered him, her young voice carrying wisdom beyond her years. Everyone deserves a chance to choose differently. That's what this was all about. The right to choose who we become instead of being trapped by who others think we should be. 3 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the newly established Galactic Cooperation Station, watching as ships from dozens of species arrived for the first interspecies gender equality summit. The Draconic Empire had become the Draconic Republic, its new constitution guaranteeing equal rights regardless of gender, size, or ability. The 3 young dragons who had started it all were now traveling throughout the galaxy, demonstrating their unique abilities and inspiring other oppressed groups to demand change. Stellaris had helped the Altarians develop new technologies by precisely manipulating electromagnetic fields. Nebula was teaching hyperspace navigation to species who had never dreamed of faster-than-light travel, and Luna was serving as a translator between civilizations that had never been able to communicate before. Dr. Vasquez joined Sarah at the observation window, carrying a datapad full of reports from the transformation efforts. The latest census figures from the former empire, she said, shaking her head in amazement. Female dragons make up 67% of the population. For 8 centuries, they were hiding in plain sight, pretending to be something they weren't just to survive. And now they're leading the transformation. Female dragons are heading up the new government, redesigning the military, establishing diplomatic relations with former enemies. Turns out that when you give people the freedom to be themselves, amazing things happen. Sarah nodded, thinking about the long journey that had brought them here. It had started with a simple distress call, a father's desperate plea for help saving his daughters, but it had become something much larger, a reminder that the universe was always ready to change, always ready to become something better, if people had the courage to stand up for what was right. Any word from the Harmony's Edge? Dr. Vasquez asked. They finally reached Haven's Rest last week. The colonists are settling in well, and Captain Chen is already planning return trips to help with the reconstruction efforts here. And us? Sarah smiled, watching as a group of young dragons, both male and female, played together in the station's central plaza. For the first time in 8 centuries, dragon children were growing up believing they could become anything they dreamed of. We're exactly where we need to be, she said, helping to build a future where no one has to choose between being themselves and being safe. In the plaza below, Luna looked up at the observation deck and waved, her telepathic voice reaching Sarah's mind with a message of gratitude and hope. Thank you for teaching us that the strongest thing in the universe isn't the biggest dragon or the most powerful weapon. It's the willingness to stand up for others even when you have nothing to gain and everything to lose. And that, Sarah reflected, was the most human thing of all.